If you drive an AMG, there is something under your hood you should check right now, because one small metal plaque can tell you more about your car than almost any badge on the trunk. Open the hood, look at the engine cover, and if your AMG uses one of the hand-built power plants, you may see a name. Not a model number, not a barcode, a person's name. The signature of the technician who assembled that engine from beginning to end. That little plaque represents one of the strangest traditions in modern performance cars, because AMG was never supposed to become what it is today. Mercedes did not create AMG in some corporate strategy meeting. Two Mercedes engineers effectively created it after deciding the company itself was not willing to go far enough. No huge factory, no giant development budget, no global marketing machine. Just Hans Werner Aufrecht, Erhard Melcher, a rented former mill outside Stuttgart, and an almost unreasonable obsession with making Mercedes engines faster than Mercedes thought they needed to be. Within a few years, that obsession produced a gigantic red luxury sedan that went racing against purpose-built machines and shocked Europe. Decades later, those three letters would become some of the most valuable letters Mercedes could put on a car. But there is another reason that plaque under your hood matters. AMG has expanded so dramatically that the badge now appears in very different forms, from cosmetic AMG line packages to full Mercedes AMG performance models, and not every AMG branded vehicle carries a hand-built engine at all. So if you own one or you are thinking about buying a used one, understanding exactly what is underneath that hood tells you what part of the AMG story you actually bought into. And to understand why one technician's signature matters so much, you have to go back to a time when AMG did not even exist. In the 1960s, Aufrecht and Melcher worked inside Mercedes-Benz engine development. Mercedes was already one of the most respected manufacturers in the world, but its priorities were very clear: refinement, reliability, comfort, engineering quality. Aufrecht and Melcher appreciated all of that, but they were fascinated by something else: extracting serious competition performance from engines that had never been designed to behave like race motors. In the middle of the decade, they developed a competition version of the Mercedes 300 SE engine for private racing use. The engine went to driver Manfred Schick, and the results immediately suggested these two engineers understood something special. The racing program collected 10 victories during the season. For Aufrecht, that was proof. Mercedes hardware could do far more than the factory was asking from it. The problem was that Mercedes itself was not looking to create the kind of wild performance operation Aufrecht imagined. So in late 1966, he left. Melcher followed, and in 1967, the two founded their own engineering company in Bergstall. They called it AMG. The A came from Aufrecht. The M came from Melcher. The G came from Gross Esbach, Aufrecht's birthplace. Three letters that originally represented two engineers, one hometown, and a simple business model. Take a Mercedes and uncover the performance hiding inside it. Think about the risk involved. They were not launching a new supercar brand with billionaire investors behind them. They were betting that a small group of Mercedes customers wanted something the factory was not providing: more power, sharper response, racing credibility, more aggression without giving up the basic engineering foundation of a Mercedes. And almost immediately, customers proved them right. Owners began bringing cars to AMG for engine work, and private racing teams discovered that these two former Mercedes engineers could transform respectable luxury machinery into something genuinely intimidating. But tuning engines for enthusiasts was not what made the world remember AMG. That happened in 1971, when AMG showed up at the 24 Hours of Spa with a car that looked almost comically wrong for the job. The Mercedes 300 SEL was an enormous four-door luxury sedan. It was heavy, long, comfortable, and designed more for executives than racing drivers. In other words, it was exactly the kind of car nobody would choose if the mission was to fight lightweight competition machines for 24 hours. AMG chose it anyway. They enlarged the engine to 6.8 liters, prepared the chassis for racing, painted the huge sedan bright red, and took it to Belgium. The car quickly acquired a nickname: the Red Pig. It was not difficult to understand why. Parked beside smaller race cars, it looked enormous. More than 4,000 pounds of German luxury sedan sitting on a grid where weight was supposed to be the enemy. It looked like a joke right until the race began. Driven by Hans Heyer and Clemens Schickentanz, the Red Pig finished second overall, and won its class. That result changed AMG permanently. Suddenly, the weird little engineering company modifying Mercedes engines was not merely a tuner for wealthy enthusiasts. It had taken a limousine-sized sedan into one of Europe's hardest endurance races and beaten machinery that looked far more appropriate for the job. That is the kind of result a marketing department cannot manufacture. People remember it because it captured the entire AMG philosophy in one ridiculous machine. Start with something refined, add unreasonable power, engineer the weaknesses out of it, then make it do something nobody expects. The red pig became the proof that AMG was not pretending. And buried inside that early company was another practice that would eventually become one of the most recognizable symbols of AMG craftsmanship: one man, one engine. In the beginning, this was partly necessity. AMG did not have the enormous automated production infrastructure of Mercedes-Benz. Engines were assembled by skilled specialists working in a much smaller operation. One technician could take responsibility for an engine from its initial assembly through the final stages instead of watching it move through dozens of anonymous stations. But as AMG grew, that process became philosophy: personal responsibility, one builder, one engine, one signature. On AMG engines that still follow this hand-built tradition, the technician who builds the engine places a signed plaque on it when the work is complete. That means the name under your hood is not decorative storytelling invented by an advertising agency. It identifies the person associated with building that specific engine. In a world where modern cars can feel like anonymous products assembled by gigantic automated systems, that changes the emotional experience. You know that somewhere in a Falterbach, a specialist worked on the engine sitting in your car and then effectively signed the finished product. And this is exactly why checking under the hood matters. If somebody tells you every vehicle carrying AMG styling should have one of those plaques, that is wrong. Mercedes uses AMG branding in several ways. AMG line packages can give regular Mercedes models a more aggressive appearance through wheels, bumpers, interior trim, seats, steering wheels, and other sporty details. But an AMG line package does not magically turn the car into a full Mercedes AMG performance model. Even within the Mercedes AMG range, not every powertrain is built according to the one-man, one-engine process. The plaque belongs specifically to engines produced using that hand-built tradition. So the correct question is not simply, does my car say AMG? The better question is, what AMG do I actually have? What engine is in it? And was that engine one of the units assembled by a dedicated builder? That distinction becomes especially important in the used market, where badges can be added in minutes, but engineering cannot. Anyone can buy lettering. Anyone can change a grille. Anyone can install wheels that imitate a more expensive model. But the drivetrain, brakes, suspension, cooling system, software, and engine architecture tell the real story. AMG learned this distinction itself as it evolved from rebellious outsider to official Mercedes performance division. For decades, AMG remained independent, modifying Mercedes products while building a reputation Mercedes could no longer ignore. Customers were spending serious money to buy a Mercedes and then immediately paying another company to make it more exciting. Eventually, Mercedes recognized the obvious opportunity. In the early 1990s, the two companies formally collaborated on the C36 AMG, bringing AMG performance into the dealership experience rather than forcing customers to modify cars afterward. Then the relationship became even closer. Daimler Chrysler acquired a majority interest in AMG in 1999, and by 2005 Mercedes had taken complete ownership. Normally, that is the point where enthusiasts become nervous. Small performance companies get absorbed by enormous corporations, and suddenly the sharp edges disappear. Everything becomes safer, quieter, more standardized. AMG went in the opposite direction. Mercedes gave it resources to become more ambitious. AMG evolved from modifying existing cars into an engineering organization capable of developing major components, complete performance systems, and eventually dedicated vehicles such as the SLS AMG and AMG GT. Mercedes had absorbed the rebellious operation that once existed outside its walls and turned it into the center of its performance identity. That transformation explains why a genuine Mercedes AMG is about much more than horsepower. Start with the engine. Depending on the model and generation, an AMG power plant may use substantially different internal components: turbocharging hardware, cooling, calibration, exhaust design, and output compared with the ordinary Mercedes engine family around it. Stronger rotating components, forged parts, larger turbochargers, aggressive boost strategies, and completely different engine management can transform the personality of an engine even when the displacement sounds familiar. Then comes the transmission. Shift programming becomes quicker and more aggressive because AMG assumes the driver may actually want the drivetrain to react immediately instead of disappearing into the background. All-wheel drive systems can be calibrated to send more torque rearward, preserving traction without erasing the playful behavior enthusiasts expect from a performance car. Suspension geometry, damper programming, steering response, cooling capacity, tires, and braking hardware all receive attention because speed creates problems that horsepower figures do not reveal. Those enormous drilled rotors and multi-piston calipers are not there because they photograph well through expensive wheels. A performance sedan, repeatedly slowing from very high speeds, generates brutal heat. Standard road car brakes designed around commuting and occasional emergency stops can fade rapidly under track use. AMG hardware has to survive an entirely different workload. And then there is the part owners rarely see, software. Modern performance cars are controlled as much by code as metal. Throttle mapping determines how quickly an engine answers your foot. Transmission logic decides when the car holds a gear instead of chasing fuel economy. Stability control decides how much movement it allows before intervening. Differential programming determines how power is distributed when the car exits a corner. Even exhaust valves change the personality of the vehicle depending on the selected mode. A normal Mercedes is usually designed to remove effort from driving, quiet the noise, smooth the shifts, isolate the road. An AMG takes that same foundation and deliberately lets some of the drama back in, and nowhere is that more obvious than sound. For generations of AMG owners, the noise has been nearly as important as the acceleration, a deep idle, the violent bark when the engine fires, the hard-edged growl under load, the crack on a downshift. Those characteristics are engineered, not accidental. AMG has devoted serious development work to acoustic character because engineers understand that acceleration is experienced through more than a stopwatch. One famous example is the hot V arrangement used on certain AMG turbocharged V8s. In a traditional V8 turbo layout, the turbochargers may sit outside the cylinder banks. With a hot V design, the turbos are positioned inside the V between the banks. That shortens the route exhaust gases travel to reach the turbochargers, helping response while creating a compact package with its own thermal and acoustic characteristics. Exhaust valves, ignition strategies, engine mapping, and fuel control can then shape what the driver hears in different modes. Some of the pops and crackles people associate with modern performance cars come from carefully controlled combustion and exhaust behavior during throttle lift and shifts. And as exterior noise regulations tighten, manufacturers have increasingly used cabin audio systems and sound enhancement strategies to preserve a sense of drama inside. Purists can argue about whether electronically enhanced sound belongs in a performance car, but that debate proves something important. With AMG, sound is not considered a side effect. It is part of the product, which brings us back to the badge problem. The easiest AMG to misunderstand is not necessarily a counterfeit car. It is a Mercedes wearing an AMG line package. There is nothing wrong with AMG line. If you want the appearance, larger wheels, sportier bodywork, and a more aggressive cabin without paying for or maintaining a full performance model, it can make perfect sense. The problem begins when appearance gets confused with engineering. A full Mercedes-AMG model receives changes designed around performance as a system. An AMG line car primarily receives styling and trim inspired by that world. The difference can affect far more than bragging rights. Purchase price, resale value, servicing, fuel consumption, insurance, brake costs, tires, cooling requirements, and track capability can all change dramatically. And if you are shopping used, never trust the trunk badge by itself. Decode the exact model, confirm the engine, look at the brakes and drivetrain, check the vehicle specification, then open the hood. If the particular engine is supposed to be one of AMG's hand-built units, look for the sign builder plaque. That little signature is not universal proof that every other AMG without one is fake, but on the engines that are meant to carry it, It is one of the coolest connections between modern Mercedes performance and the tiny Operation Aufrecht and Melcher started decades ago. And now AMG faces a challenge those two engineers could never have imagined. Electrification attacks the very things that made the brand emotionally recognizable. AMG was built around combustion engines, the response, heat, vibration, mechanical complexity, and sound. Electric motors can produce astonishing acceleration with almost no delay, but effortless speed is not the same thing as theater. So AMG has been experimenting with hybrids, electric assistance, advanced turbocharging, and electrified performance systems designed to combine immediate electric torque with the behavior enthusiasts still associate with combustion. Four-cylinder hybrid AMGs can now deliver performance figures that once demanded much larger engines. Electrically assisted turbo technology can reduce lag. Future dedicated electric AMG products can use software, synthetic sound, simulated shifting behavior, and highly controlled torque delivery to create drama that an electric motor does not naturally produce in the same way. Technically, the opportunity is enormous. Emotionally, the challenge is even bigger. AMG has never existed simply because Mercedes needed the fastest possible 0 to 60 number. If numbers were the entire point, the story would have ended the moment electric cars started launching harder than combustion performance sedans. AMG exists because two engineers believed a Mercedes could feel more alive. That is the real thread connecting everything. The race-tuned engines of the 1960s, the absurd red pig at Spa, the hand-signed V8 under an owner's hood, the aggressive shift programming, oversized brakes, crackling exhaust, and the future electric machines engineers are now trying to make emotional. So if an AMG is sitting in your driveway, open the hood, look closely, find out exactly what engine you own. If it is one of the hand-built AMG engines, find that plaque and read the name on it, because you are looking at a tradition that began when a tiny group of engineers had no automated production empire behind them, and personal responsibility was simply how the work got done. Then look beyond the plaque, because the bigger lesson is that AMG has always been about what is underneath the badge. Aufrecht and Melcher walked away from Mercedes because they wanted more performance than the company was prepared to offer. A few years later, their enormous red sedan finished second overall at Spa and forced the racing world to notice. Their independent tuning company became Mercedes' official performance partner, then part of Mercedes itself, then the division trusted to create machines from the ground up. That is a remarkable full-circle story. The corporation that once had no place for their obsession eventually bought the obsession and made it one of its defining identities. A regular Mercedes is engineered primarily to make difficult speed feel effortless. AMG has traditionally been engineered to make speed feel memorable. That difference is why the name still matters, and it is why the most interesting AMG badge on your car might not be the one on the trunk at all. It may be the tiny signature waiting underneath the hood, attached to an engine built by one person who was willing to put their name on the finished machine. If you own an AMG, tell me exactly which model you have and whether there is a builder plaque under the hood. And if you had to choose between the drama of a full AMG and the silent, effortless luxury of a Maybach, which one would you put in your garage?